my friend, and welcome to the study. Today we're going to look at some adventure, just a little, but we'll have a nice relaxing paper sound, a little bit of fabric, nice and easy, calming, few moments in our small oasis here. So what I've brought to show you today starts with a book. I've wrapped this book in some canvas fabric. It's a small pocket edition in English of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This one is published by Longman, and it's very conveniently pocket size to put in a bag or pocket or backpack to take with you on your own adventures. It has gold on the page edges and this lovely striped and decorated dust cover, and inside we see that this book is cloth covered, hardcover, with a ribbon for a marker. You can see that the picture on the front, of course, shows the iconic balloon with which our main character, Phileas Fogg, and more or less the subject of this video, is associated. So this book is translated from the 1873 publication by Jules Verne of Autour du Monde, 80 jours, from his Voyage Extraordinaire. This story has had many adaptations in literature, in film, television, animation, graphic novels, and video game, as well as card games. Being a Verne idea or story, it is hardly surprising that this was so widely adopted and adapted and popular. Of the many adaptations of Around the World in 80 Days, in which which an English gentleman makes a wager following the completion of a train line in India to succeed in traveling all the way around the world in 80 days, is the iconic 1956 film adaptation starring David Niven, Cantinflas and Shirley MacLaine, as well as cameo appearances by so many stars. This film was produced by Michael Todd, released by United Artists. A lengthy, epic film directed by Michael Anderson and with a fantastic music score composed by Victor Young, whose music you would probably recognize if you heard. This film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And it was perhaps the instrument that associated Phileas Fogg with the giant balloon. Our Phileas Fogg is an eccentric and wealthy, albeit solitary, English gentleman, around 40 years old, residing in London's Saville Row, a very stylish place in the late 19th century. He has a complete obsession with punctuality and routine. And has no close relationships with anyone discernible. So he is somewhat of a conundrum in his gentleman's club, the Reform Club, where he spends most of his time reading newspapers and gambling card games. In the year 1872, number 7 Saville Row, Burlington Gardens, in the house in which Sheridan died in 1816, was occupied by Phileas Fogg, Esquire. Of the members of the Reform Club in London, few, if any, were more peculiar or more specially noticed than Phileas Fogg, although he seemed to make a point of doing nothing that could draw attention. So one of the greatest orators who honour England had for a successor this man Phileas Fogg, a sphinx-like person, of whom nothing was known except that he was a thorough gentleman, and one of the handsomest men in English high society. We learn a bit more about Fogg as it goes on. He was said to be like Byron. His head, at least, was supposed to be like Byron's, for his feet were faultless. A Byron with a moustache and whiskers, a phlegmatic Byron who would have lived 1,000 years without getting any older. English Phileas Fogg certainly was, though perhaps not a Londoner. No one had ever seen him at the Stock Exchange or the Bank, or at any of the offices in the city. No ship owned by Phileas Fogg had ever been berthed in the basins or docks of London. He was not to be found on any board of directors. His name had never been heard among the barristers of the Temple. Lincoln's Inn, or Gray's Inn, so he is a very enigmatic character. He's not seen in any of the usual places. However, Phileas Fogg was a member of the Reform Club. He was nothing else. That such a mysterious person should have been numbered among this honourable company might cause astonishment. Let me say, then, that he was admitted on the recommendation of the Messrs. Baring brothers, on whom he was at liberty to draw to an extent unlimited. From this fact he derived a certain standing, as his cheques were regularly cashed at sight, out of balance, his current account, always in credit. Phileas Fogg was undeniably a wealthy man, but how he had made his fortune was more than the best informed could say. One day he sees in the newspaper an announcement of the completion of a railway across India. Whilst playing whist with his friends at the club, and this prompts him to make a daring wager. On this same day, he is employed a new valet, a Frenchman named Passepartout. My word, said Passepartout to himself, a little dazed at first. I have known at Madame Tussaud's folks with just as much life in them as my new master. It should be said that Madame Tussaud's folks are wax figures, very popular with sightseers in London, and in which speech alone is lacking. Passepartout had just had a very hurried glimpse of Phileas Fogg, but he had quickly yet carefully looked over his new master. His age might have been 40, his countenance was noble and handsome, his figure tall, and none the worse for a slight tendency to stoutness. His hair and whiskers were fair. His forehead was smooth and bore no signs of wrinkles at the temples. His face had little colour. The teeth were splendid. He appeared to possess in the highest degree what physiognomists call rest in action, a virtue shared by all who are more efficient than noisy. Even-tempered, phlegmatic, with a clear and steady eye, he was the perfect type of those cool Englishmen who are fairly numerous in the United Kingdom, and whose somewhat academic pose had been wonderfully portrayed by the brush of Angelica Kauffmann. When you considered the various functions of this man's existence, you conceived the idea of being well balanced and accurately harmonized throughout, as perfect as a chronometer by Leroy and Earnshaw. The fact is, Phileas Fogg was the personification of accuracy. He was one of those mathematically precise people who, never hurried and always ready, waste no step or movement. He always went by the shortest way, so never took a stride more than was needed. He never gave the ceiling an unnecessary glance, and never indulged in a superfluous gesture. No one ever saw him moved or put out, though no man ever hurried so little. He was always on time. And so, this is how Phileas Fogg his new valet Passepartout. Departing on the train, October 21st at 8:45 p.m. Planning to arrive back 80 days later, December 21st at 8:45 p.m. Along with Passepartout, they travel to Egypt, via Suez to India, then on to China, Japan, the United States, and back to England, traversing all 360 degrees of the globe. It's this intrepid character that Jules Verne is so very talented at bringing to life on his pages. But Phileas Fogg has one flaw, if it could be called a flaw. It is love, the realization that he is in love with Aouda, the Indian princess that he rescues, and throws away all of his phlegmatic eccentricity, and even he thinks his wager to spend the rest of his life with her. And that is the real triumph of the book, despite the fact that he does win the wager. He overcomes obstacles in his path. He is completely under his own steam, his own boss. And everything in his world is ordered. Until, of course, he meets Aouda. Nothing seems to shake Phileas Fogg, not the Scotland Yard detective sent to stop him, Inspector Fix, nor the delays with tickets, money, and travel. And nothing seems to dampen his spirit. And that, I think, is a very lovely idea for the beginning of spring, or indeed any time our own spirits need a lift. And this spirit of adventure and self-possession comes out in Jules Verne's own life. Jules grew up in the French city on the Atlantic of Nantes, and there's a marvelous, tiny, charming Jules Verne museum there, and a statue nearby of a man looking out to sea with his sextant, and a little boy sitting on the bench behind, watching with amazement and a desire to go where all the ships go that come to the port and leave on the tide to places unknown, far, far away. This is a drawing made by Jules Verne, somewhat battered, and I have to say, also not original, it's a copy. very famous drawing that Jules Verne made of his own sailing boat, the Saint-Michel. This is the first one, the premiere. It was the first boat that Jules Verne acquired, based in the port of Courtrai, before he wrote around the world in 80 days. It was August 1865 when Jules Verne decided to rent a house at Courtrai, and this is a place that he described at length in his Géographie illustrée, La France et ses colonies. He brought his wife Honorine, his two adopted daughters, Suzanne and Valentine, and his son Michel. And in the spring of 1868, he rented another small villa with 2 floors called La Solitude. And that is when he built this boat with 2 masts and gaff-rigged sails. The Saint-Michel is a pourcé-malais, or a lug rig or ketch, with a smaller mast at the stern and a taller foremast. This is a typical boat for channel vessels, the English Channel. The Saint-Michel was not necessarily a pleasure sailor, but I think for Jules it was a great pleasure. It was 9 meters long, weighed 5 tons, and was designed by and modified. There was a small cabin about 3 meters long and almost 2 meters wide. There were 2 sofas or benches and a chart table. The boat was finished being built on the 29th of May, 1868, and Jules Verne took possession on the 3rd of June. In this boat he made voyages in and along the English Channel to Douvres, London, and Ostend, and in May 1870 he went to Havre and navigated it up the Seine to Paris. It was in this boat and on these little voyages that he was inspired to write some of his most famous adventure books, or stories such as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days. We can derive his excitement from some of his letters. In 1876, Saint-Michel II or II. But this one remains, possibly because of his drawing in the creative imagination, and as featured on the covers of books as well as other Jules Verne references and literature. And here I have something just for you, my friend. It's post in an envelope. Let's open it together. I can hear the sound of the paper. It's a balloon. Truly nothing more evocative of the character of Phileas Fogg than a balloon. And indeed, though there was no balloon in Around the World in 80 Days, it was present in that iconic 1956 film where David Niven very charmingly takes his champagne bucket, drops it over the side and grabs some snow from the mountaintop in which to chill his champagne, and Passepartout serves him chicken as they cross the Pyrenees. Jules Verne did write the book 5 weeks in a balloon, in which some Englishmen take a balloon across Africa This one is a swing card. Just going to put it together like that for you. There you can see the balloon hanging there, and the light from the clouds, and the many colors and patterns. Circles, diamonds, flowers, and in the basket, 2 people. Floating away through the clouds. You can see the sandbags and the other balloonists around them, and the pink sash in their large, great, hot air, lifting them along. So let this lift your spirits, and keep as we think of that little boy, Jules Verne, watching the ships in Nantes, imagining adventures, and realizing that no matter what the world dishes out, love does conquer all. And I'm reminded of that quote that I will give you today, just for you, often attributed to Mark Twain, but possibly the invention of a later author, though he doesn't claim it for his own. It rings very true for all of us. 20 years from now, no matter how old you are, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones that you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover, be good to yourself,